Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Clark. And this is the Conservative Five, an online TV news production of Liberty Nation News. On today's episode, A Path Forward, Joe Biden has left the campaign trail, tagging in Harris as his favorite pick. We'll discuss in They Got Him, Now What? Trump's failed assassination attempt, getting Congress engaged in a Secret Service epic fail investigation, has finger pointers on the hot seat, and a renewed interest in an Israeli strategy is creating angst, and we'll talk about it in the Iron Dome. Finally, it's another quick fix to flex the brain in Just for Fun, Volume 54. All this and more coming up in this edition of the Conservative Five. To be polite. So Dave's cheating. On Sunday, July 21st, President Joe Biden stepped away from his re-election campaign and endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to take his spot. It took 24 days after a disastrous debate of begging, bickering, and betrayal by his closest allies to remind the man he wasn't really in charge of his own destiny. More than 14 million Democrats cast votes supporting Biden through the primary process. Are they feeling the love for Kamala or perhaps someone else? I'd like to start our discussion today with that fancy tie wearing John Clark, who finally got through to the president. Do we have any idea what happened here?
Well, I think that we could all speculate, and many people are. And what I did find, as far as actual facts that I could find, the Daily Mail recently put a piece out about what prompted him to step down. And a couple of things struck me about it. They cited inside sources that said people finally got through to him when he was shut down with COVID, that his poll numbers were plummeting. Of course, we also know that his donations were plummeting. But what was interesting about the Mail's article is they used terms like it was a last minute, that the White House was completely blindsided by him dropping a bomb. It's like the debate all over again, that people are shocked that this was coming when so many observers saw it was coming. So it seems to be a convergence of factors, and it seems to be that they're trying to repackage this now as a victory.
It's like they're doing the right thing for the right reason.
Well, I don't know about that. Well, we'll be seeing, but
well, how do they repackage this? How do they repackage an absolute crazy show from day one with this particular president in the media, and I mean, somebody bigger than the rest of us had to get through to him, because the American people have been, begging for a cleanup on aisle one for a while.
But they're trying to repackage it that Kamala Harris is going to win, and that haven't they repackaged everything? From the debate was just a bad night, that repackaging didn't age well, to he was doing so great, he's on top of his game, didn't age well. I'm wondering if we're going to see another similar progression with Kamala Harris. She's going to win. Gee, she had a bad night. Wow, maybe she's not cut out for it. Gee, this person's going to win. It's this packaging that I think is more notable than the actual motivations for President Biden to sit down.
You already see that. I think it was Axios. They scrubbed, or they reported how the right wing, how the conservatives are complaining that Kamala Harris was a border czar and she never did anything with the southern border. And now, but 3 years ago, it was reported that Biden appointed her as the border czar, but now it's some right-wing conspiracy theory that she was the border czar. Make up your mind. Oh, so that's the part of it. And then you're also seeing these journalists who are having cooking lessons with Kamala Harris. It was like the 2020 campaign when they went shoe shopping with Kamala Harris, or clothing shopping, and everyone was drooling over her and not having actual real questions and conversations. This next 3 months is going to be a nauseating affair in this election cycle.
I'm pretty sure Dave's going to go cut down all those trees she planted in Guatemala, but if you get him on a plane anytime soon. Hey, Graham, okay. What are the odds that we see an immediate virtual convention from the Democratic Party? Do you think they'll let it go to the full convention?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, they kind of foisted even Kamala Harris onto their voters, and And I think it's funny that a lot of people on the left are getting very upset because people on the right are saying, look, you guys said you were the defenders of democracy. And, Joe Biden got most of the votes and like 99% of the delegates. He was the choice of, 14 million, whatever it was, Democrat voters. And now you've basically carried out a coup within your own party, which is exactly what has happened. Anyone who actually thinks that Joe Biden made this decision to step aside, no, he didn't. They threatened him, they coerced him, they bribed him, they did something, they forced him out. I always said that he would not be replaced and that he'd run for re-election. And I based that on the fact that I knew Joe Biden would never kind of accept defeat, accept his limitations and say, okay, I can't do this. I'm stepping away. And I don't believe for 1 minute that he did. They forced him out and replaced him with Kamala Harris, or at least they're trying to. And back to your question, Sarah, well, yeah, will they try this, virtual roll call of delegates before the convention so that they don't have to risk some kind of brokered convention or some kind of, infighting or other people trying to muscle in there? I think they might do that. Clearly the Democrats have shown that they have absolutely no respect for any kind of democratic process. So I think they could well do the virtual thing ahead of the convention and then say, look, okay, it's a done deal. No more arguing about it. Kamala Harris is our candidate.
If I was a voter and this happened this late in the game, I'd already cast my ballot in the primary. I already knew who I wanted to lead the ticket. I would be very angry if that person stepped down and then they picked for me. So, and I don't know if anybody else would think that way. I don't know if Democrats right now are wondering if they're getting sold a bill of goods. I mean, I don't know. And I what will they do with all those printed ballots now? Are they going to have to recycle them or what? Anyway, Andrew, clean up on Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's think about this. Could President Kamala bring something else to the table in terms of an economic policy? I mean, she has a mess to clean up if she is indeed the nominee and then perhaps elected.
Well, not really. And I have a warning to all our viewers who love Graham Noble. I may have to force him into retirement here because I'm going to say something he may not like. But Kamalanomics is not really all that different from Bidenomics. I mean, you look at the 2020 campaign itself. She wanted to ban fracking. She wanted to abolish the filibuster to pass the Green New Deal. She wanted Medicare for all. She wanted universal health care for illegals. She was in lockstep with her boss's legislative trifecta, Inflation Reduction Act, Chip Science Act, and bipartisan infrastructure law. If you look at GovTrack, her record, she voted a lot of times left to Bernie Sanders. So that should tell you everything you wanted to know. I think it was a recent YouGov poll, and it found that many voters don't think she's better than Trump on the inflation front. And considering her policies that she supports and a lot of the Democrats support, and let's face it, a lot of the Republicans advocate, inflation not going to be defeated under Kamalanomics. So overall, voters should not be expecting anything different whatsoever under a potential Harris administration.
Okay, so we have maybe a potential start to 2025 with more of the same. Dave, how about let's face it, this last 4 years have been a disaster with foreign relations. I don't think I have to bring it all back up, but I'm gonna click off the top ones: Afghanistan, Ukraine, Gaza. Would she be a better person in this area than her predecessor?
Sarah, it's doubtful. I mean, the Democrats are going from an indecisive president with the foreign policy instincts of a gnat to Kamala, the candidate who believed she was being insightful, remember, in tutoring Europeans that World War II was really, really bad for them, and that Russia is really big and Ukraine not so big. Look, she stood by in the White House agreeing with the catastrophic decisions Biden made in the retreat from Afghanistan. And, she's offered nothing of substance in moving toward eliminating the Iran-backed terrorist organization Hamas and bringing peace to Gaza. And that's the only way peace is going to come to Gaza, is if Hamas is eliminated, totally destroyed. And the closest that she's come to doing anything productive was the totally irrelevant trip to Central America as the newly appointed and rapidly failed border czar, as we've talked about, planting apple trees while looking for root causes, to keep the metaphor going. And, essentially the invasion of illegals got worse after her trip, topping 11 million, as we know. It is interesting that in a recent Time magazine, there was an attempt to come up with Harris's defense, claiming that the VP wasn't really the border czar after all, but just a fact-finding person, and trying to figure out what was causing the flood of illegal aliens, missing the fact that it was an open border. Whether she's a czar or a research assistant, Kamala Harris has failed. And if you're looking for some epiphany about U.S. foreign policy, or Kamala Harris becoming an instant savant in international relations, you'll have better luck talking with a coconut, as she's so fond of saying. With regard to foreign relations, she's an empty pantsuit. And remember, during the 2020 primaries, Kamala Harris garnered a whopping, are you ready for this? 844 votes. The people are actually pretty astute.
I will say though,
but just remember one thing though. I mean, it's a good point. You bring that thing up about how many votes, how badly she did in the primaries, but of course we have to remember that Joe Biden, in any of the previous presidential races that he entered, he never got more than about 1% of the Democratic primary vote, and yet in 2020 he got more votes than any other presidential candidate in history.
I would at least say that Kamala Harris looks better in a pantsuit than Hillary Clinton. I will concede that.
I look better in a pantsuit than Hillary Clinton.
A coconut.
The bar is low.
A coconut in the pantsuit. And I think, though, so either Democrat or Republican Party, what we're talking about here is you need both a message and a messenger. And as you've pointed out, both of you and Andrew, she's going to carry forward the same message. I think it's a little harder to change your messaging in mid race, especially this close to the election, but it is not at all a sure thing that she's going to be the candidate. So are we going to look at the next chapter in this debacle as she goes through a similar process? I think they are pushing to make her the candidate, and force feed her like goose liver Americans. A lot of Democrats are willing to take anyone carrying that message. So I think it's not over yet, and that's why they're panicking.
The reference or the metaphor has been used to, the Chicago thugs and their approach to politics. And I think that's a very good comparison. And they win, incidentally, John. When the Chicago political machine starts to work, it wins. And so if the Democratic Party wants to put Kamala Harris, as lame as she is, into the position of a primary or the candidate for president, they'll do it.
I think now is the time. We better start talking about the RFK factor that everybody seems to be avoiding, but I think he's gathering steam after this, last crazy thing in this crazy election. Clark.
Well, it's been said previously here, the Democrats have shown they're not democratic. We could talk about Bernie Sanders and what was done in favor of the Hillary Clinton, queen. They're talking about dragging her out again now. I don't know how that would go. But I think we're seeing a third chapter, aren't we, of an undemocratic Democratic Party, as Dave just said. It is a totalitarian Democratic Party. And if that's what they want to do with Kamala, against the wishes of their own base, I think many of them will flee to Robert Kennedy. But that is what's most striking. Robert Kennedy is out there. He's got percentages. He's got support. He's on the ballots. And crickets. It's as if the mainstream media have forgotten that he existed. Nope, they haven't forgotten. They are gaslighting and sidelining him. I'm wondering. I just have no idea what that looks like as we go forward.
We've all seen what happens when the media chases after people that they don't like or they ignore them. That's that's part of the reason we had a President Trump in the White House. But I'm thinking, just in the talks that I hear in my little places that I go, it's all about disenfranchisement. They're mad. I mean, people are just mad that they don't, they cast votes, they don't have a say. They, want to get RFK Jr. on the ballot. And they're saying, but what, that just throws my vote away. Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, in a true democracy, we should all have a vote. Every voice should be heard. And that's how we run our elections, even though we are a constitutional republic. Yeah, I know I'm going to get letters. But, when that democracy part is initiated, people are kind of crabby. I think they're looking for a way out. I don't think they like the two candidates. I'm sure that I don't know. I'm getting lost in my own, I don't know, soapbox. So somebody save me.
Well, I find it funny. Every single election cycle, you always see the mainstream media talking to voters, and they're always saying, "What? 300 million people in this country? These are the two best candidates we can find." So it seems like every election cycle, this is the same message. Nobody likes either candidate, but they're gonna hold their nose and still vote for that person anyway.
If only we let Canadians run, we could improve our options.
You guys can have Justin Trudeau. Here, take him. You can have it.
Okay, John
You
Clark,
could run.
More than anyone, can you imagine the nicknames that they would give Andrew with the French pronunciation of moron? That's you penned on that.
Yeah, John. Now
comment.
You gave everyone that secret away. What the heck?
That was a Freudian slip. I never even subconsciously was aware that I thought of you that way as a French person.
It'd just be a rash of memes. All right, guys.
Je suis moron.
The Moran
We're
in
not
chief.
speaking that today. We can speak that later. Well, Mr. Biden's departure has left a wake of voters struggling to figure out what to do with their own Democratic Party. Will they rally around whatever the party tells them to, or go rogue? I don't know. Thanks, panel. The assassination attempt of former President Trump on July 13th has left too many unanswered questions. This week on Capitol Hill, Congress attempted to unravel what went wrong with Trump's assigned security detail. Democrats used the platform to wheedle away at the Second Amendment, but all was not lost. Graham, what happened? And can you address the highlights and even the lowlights if you want to go there?
Sure, Sarah. Obviously, what we're referring to here is the congressional hearing, the Oversight Committee, House Oversight Committee, dragged in Kimberly Cheadle, the current director of the Secret Service, but now outgoing director. And basically, they attempted to get her to tell them something about what happened on that day, anything at all. And she really, of all the congressional hearings I've watched, and you always get this case where the government official who is being grilled will try to worm their way out of answering a lot of questions. Well, if avoiding giving answers was an Olympic sport, Cheadle would have gotten, a triple gold medals, I'm sure. She really did give them nothing. And it was even some Democrats. Yes, there were a few Democrats at that hearing who tried to make it about gun violence. And some of them drew the most bizarre connections, and they started going on about how how these states that are allowing permitless carry now for pistols, somehow that's leading to more mass shootings. Bizarre how they come up with that. But anyway, they were going off on a tangent. But there were other Democrats there who were really giving Director Cheadle, I should say Cheadle, her name is not Cheadle, it's Cheadle, a hard time, really giving her a hard time. And they wanted to know, why was there such a delay in getting to neutralizing the shooter? Why was Trump even allowed to take the stage when they knew beforehand that there was a threat And basically there were Democrats who were saying, you should resign or be fired. It was a remarkably non-partisan, or if you like, bipartisan hearing for the most part, apart from those wacky Democrats who went on about guns. But here's the thing, Cheadle's answer was that, well, there was no threat. It was just there was a guy who we decided, or who her agents decided, was behaving suspiciously. He had a rangefinder. That's not necessarily highly suspicious that you're walking around with a rangefinder, because some people actually use those. And I believe it was actually a golf rangefinder rather than a rangefinder for a rifle. And some people actually use those when they go to these events, if they're stuck way at the back of the crowd or whatever. But then he's eyeballing this roof. And then he actually gets up onto the roof, which is outrageous because, I've been trained in that very business, that side of the security business. And I know full well, anybody knows in that position that there's no way they should have left that roof unmanned. And they said, well, it was part of our overwatch, Well, that didn't work out too well, did it? You had a counter sniper team that was supposed to be observing that roof. Clearly they weren't. That kid got up on the roof, he was standing up, then he was lying down, he was shifting around, because this was being filmed by some of the rally goers. And so it was appalling. Back to the hearing, as I wrote actually on the pages of libertynation.com, it was obvious that Cheadle was going to have to go. It took me a little bit by surprise that she basically tendered her resignation the next day after that hearing, but it was a dreadful performance. And there is no way, that was such a disastrous, it was an absolutely appalling security blunder. And there's no way she should have stayed on. But what is particularly annoying is that it doesn't seem, I don't think anybody else is going to be held accountable for the mistakes that were made that day. We'll see when the reports come back
just the director,
and the FBI, but we'll see what happens.
What I even heard that AOC was badgering her pretty good.
AOC actually went there. I'm surprised she went there, and she basically, she just she tore a few strips off of the director for sure.
Well, what Dems have refused to testify and why? Weren't there a kind of a little bit of a laundry list of people that just said, no, I ain't going to do it?
That's it's difficult to say actually, because I heard this, and I even saw something someone pointed out to me, someone posted on X that basically Alejandro Mayorkas, the director of the Department of Homeland Security, which is of course the kind of parent department of the Secret Service, and Christopher Wray and somebody else had all basically said no, they're not going to testify. I don't know how true that was, because I believe Wray is actually in front of Congress today answering some questions about that. So I'm not sure, but I do feel that, and in fact I wrote about this as well, I think the reaction of the Biden administration as a whole to this event, which was a seismic event. I mean, had Trump been killed, this country could well be in absolute chaos right now. Yes. And I think the Biden administration's reaction to this attempted assassination is remarkably, unhurried, remarkably subdued. It's almost like they kind of almost shrugged their shoulders and went, "Oh, that was terrible, but oh well, let's move on."
Oops, that was awful.
Yeah.
Sorry we failed. Epic fail by the Secret Service. They have one job, and that is to protect president or former president. And I don't get it. They're better than that. They are always and always have been better than that. Will you think this will result in change and better protection, Andrew, any of this hearing, or do you think they're just gonna get rid of the head of the snake and call it good?
Well, actually, if you see some of Trump's latest security team, they definitely don't look like diversity, equity, inclusion hires. And what's even funnier, if you saw Cheadle walk on a Capitol Hill, once again, you see the people that she was surrounded by. They did not look like DEI hires at all. Now, the skeptic in me would say that no, DEI in Washington is here to stay, and there's unlikely to be any changes. But at the same time, the optimist would say to me that look at ESG. Those three letters have turned into absolute poison. For those who don't know, ESG is sustainable investing. It stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's a woke form of investing. Anyway, its biggest proponents like BlackRock, they're moving away from those letters. So like ESG, DEI is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's for all the people who want to appear progressive in Washington or in Wall Street. But as long as there's demand for it, there's always going to be a supply. So on one hand, DEI, it should die like ESG, but it will not, unfortunately.
Oh shoot! How's the press been reporting on both the incident and the hearing this week, Dave?
Well, I think that the initial reporting was an attempt to minimize the assassination attempt, calling it an incident, loud noise, which I think all of us could agree with. But once they got their journalistic sea legs and they started in with the disinformation and conspiracy theories, I think that they got on a roll. And those theories actually range from every lunatic notion that you can think of. Trump wasn't really shot. I think that the blood belied that notion, but or he staged the shooting himself in hopes that the shot would be really accurate and only take out his ear.
Well, a 20-year-old kid on a hot roof. And he apparently has ninja skills. He had ninja skills because the Secret Service couldn't pull it off.
Well, and then it was Trump's fault because of his hateful rhetoric that prompted the assassination. But I think that over time, some more adult reporting has appeared and is more factual. But what the media is trying to do now is simply admit that happened and okay, it was really bad. But let's try to minimize the positive political effects that might result, in Trump looking a whole lot better. And I think that's where they're at right now. And, this generally takes actually the form of them not reporting any further aspects of the July 13th event and or the assassination attempt. Mm-hmm. And I think, though, the media is going to have a pretty tough job, and because whether they want to report on the specifics of the assassination attempt or not, they're going to have to deal with the oversight committees, both the Senate and House, who are hot on grilling former Secret Service members, the state police, as we saw. And the problem they have is that both the Democrats and the Republicans are equally keen on coming to some understanding of what exactly happened. And I think that I didn't want to let Andrew's point slip by without mentioning the fact that the McKinsey report that originally gave rise to all of the diversity, equity, and inclusion benefits has been proven to be a scam. They couldn't duplicate it, and McKinsey has egg on their face. I mean, if you can have a corporation that could have egg on its face, it does.
But McKinsey's the same one that told New York for, I think, was a $3 million that if you have a garbage can, you can put garbage in there and clean the streets. So I think the McKinsey is a genius.
Genius. John, here's what I noticed right after the assassination attempt. Trump was on stage a couple days later. He was at the convention. He was working the room. He was talking to people. He gave a great speech.
So tonight, with faith and devotion, I proudly accept your nomination for President of the United States. Thank you.
And then he showed up in Michigan for a rally a couple days later. And he was back. I mean, boom. He is doing his bombastic Trump and name calling and pointing fingers. And Joe Biden, before he actually stepped away, went to Delaware and hid. And people haven't seen him or, talked to him for a while. And then all this transpired. So going forward, how do you think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are going to run their elections from this point forward. Has this made a difference, or is it back to business as usual?
Oh, easy peasy question. By the way,
Really? I'm
Dave,
gonna work harder then.
the Supreme Court did rule in Citizens United that corporations can get egg on their face, just so for the so there are a few complexities here that I think are very interesting. We've been watching the Democratic Party implode for a while. This is a party that has shown remarkable discipline and lockstep, sometimes over the most extreme of issues. If there's one thing they have is party loyalty, and it's fragmenting. And it was fragmenting before the debate. It started fragmenting more after the debate. It's continued to fragment. And I think we're going to see more of that. Meanwhile, the Republicans are actually enthused in rebuilding, not in hating their enemies, but in building up hope for their nation. It's an exuberant kind of conservative form of change you can believe in. Though I think people really believe in it more. They're desperate to get away from this identity politics, the DEI, that the Democrats are going to keep pumping. You know, I saw a big debate on social media this morning about Kamala Harris, with Democrats saying that they're so tired of the sexism against her. Can we just move past what her gender is and what her accomplishments aren't, and her, you know, her rosy spirituality about the future she's going to create by, you know, ignoring the past? But you asked Dave something, and I thought it was very interesting. So, by the way, direct answer to your question, this has had two immediate impacts on the Trump campaign. One is huge support and enthusiasm, just from a messaging perspective, just from a patriotic perspective. They couldn't have asked for a better, campaign rally than shooting him through the ear. Kind of like when they convicted him of a number of crimes they can't even define. It rebounded against them. And so what are their next steps? And so now this cage is being rattled because they keep using all of these lies as their narrative. They keep collapsing. And when you ask Dave about what the media is saying, they created vacuum. Part of the indictment, I mean, it was a piranha fest on Cheeto. I was amazed.
You know what it is, though. No, you're just not going to tell us, right?
I was excited. I am so sick of administrative lack of accountability. This is what Project 2025 is about. This is an example. Was she told you're going to fall on your sword and be the scapegoat while you cover for the rest of us? Meanwhile, there was no official messaging. Dave hit on this. There was no explanation to the American people what happened by mainstream media or the authorities who were supposed to be in charge. They had nothing. Crickets. This colossal lockstep coordination between mainstream media and the Biden administration that we witnessed during COVID with Fauci, et cetera, and maybe more than one administration, it just suddenly evaporated. And now the country's been rampant with conspiracy theories about, second shooters and SS complicity, Secret Service complicity. And this is who's in charge of the misinformation, who's in charge of the messaging. So they're losing their messaging. And so right after all this happened, here's NBC Philadelphia. I just think sometimes that 1,000 words speak better than 1,000 pictures. Quote, Republicans appear to be seeing a wave of renewed enthusiasm from their base of voters following the failed attempt to assassinate former President Donald Trump last weekend. It's a sharp reversal of course for a contest that was shaping up to be a largely predictable rematch of the 2020 election. Where were you? What kind of gaslighting effort is this to, once again, at some point, and this is back to Thomas Frank, you cannot make your entire message about hating Donald Trump. At some point, you have to bring actual issues to the voters rather than infinite ad hominem attacks against J.D. Vance and everything Republican and domestic terrorists. It's all collapsing now. And I think that they're becoming empty words, and the voters are just going to be blocking them out. They're not going to listen anymore. They're not getting any truth, if anything at all. Talk about misinformation. So I think this is a major crisis. And though then in the wake of this, by the way, Biden steps down and Kamala steps up, and they're just gushing about how she raised $47 million in a day. Well, he raised a lot more than that by getting convicted as a felon. I mean,
well, anyway, she didn't raise that money anyway. That money was sitting there, and it was earmarked for Joe Biden, and the people who had that money said, "No, I'm not giving it to Joe Biden because he needs to go." And then as soon as he went, then they went, okay, now you can have our money. Yeah. I mean, Kamala Harris hasn't actually raised a penny so far.
They're trying to they're trying to create another false narrative is what I'm saying. And even their false narrative doesn't stack up. That's all I'm saying. They're imploding on every front.
I think when John mentioned
I wonder if
conspiracy,
they're reconsidering Hillary. Here's a sad thing. This is a sad thing. I'm pro women everywhere to, succeed and break the glass, as they say. But if I had to choose, I'd pick Hillary Clinton over Kamala Harris any day of the week.
Don't we have any Canadian women that can run? We have any American women of competence? Sarah, I nominate you. I know Andrew will second the nomination. Andrew?
No, I'm all for Graham.
Yeah, no. I like my position in politics just the way it is.
I like Grahamonomics. That's my favorite.
Grahamonomics.
The problem is I'm not a natural born citizen. I am an
Gary Day
unnatural
for president. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this one up. And hey, let's hope Congress gets to the bottom of all of this and gives we the people some answers. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, panel. The Israeli Iron Dome is a metaphor for an anti-ballistic missile defense over the continental United States. Something many of you may remember critics mocking President Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative by calling it Star Wars.
Before the end of this century.
During Trump's nomination acceptance speech, he made missile defense of the U.S. a major national security initiative.
Build an Iron Dome over our country.
Once upon a Cold War time, Soviet Union was the foe the government tagged as a mutually assured destruction near-peer enemy. Seems easy peasy until you had China and North Korea and a skittery Iran in a global chest puffing contest. Dave, is this long overdue? Is Trump just saying, or does he have a plan?
Well, it's not long overdue. It's sort of, muddling along. When Reagan proposed the Strategic Defense Initiative, he had in mind a robust combination of space-based laser weapons and, plus ground-based missiles capable of actually hitting an incoming ballistic missile. What Reagan wanted to do was to establish a nuclear posture that included an intercontinental ballistic missile defense, which no one up until that time had really been thinking about. He wanted to put the U.S. strategically in a much stronger nuclear position and be able to destroy Soviet missiles attacking American homeland. And while at the same time, retaining the capability to destroy Russia in return. What the U.S. now has is much less grandiose concept of missile defense. Strategic Defense Initiative Office in the Pentagon over the years evolved to the Missile Defense Agency. What was an expansive, multifaceted ground and space-based missile defense system is now 44 ballistic missile interceptors, 40 at Camp Greely in Alaska and 4 at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Donald Trump has, for some time, advocated for a missile defense system, basically to cover the continental United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. And he has the same reason that Reagan had. How can we be a sovereign nation and not want to protect our people? Now, he uses the Israeli, as you mentioned, Israeli Iron Dome system kind of as an example of what he has in mind. But the Iron Dome system covers about 63 square miles, and really you'd have to have thousands and thousands of these things. Plus the fact it doesn't have a high altitude capability. Their Arrow 3 missile system would actually be better, but he's not the only one who believes that the U.S. needs a more layered and comprehensive missile defense system. The Heritage Foundation's Project 25 makes missile defense a very top priority. Such a defense, though, is not just ground-based missile sites. The threats have evolved over the years as well, Sarah, and the U.S. faces hypersonic maneuverable warheads. I mean, that's pretty significant, and they're very difficult to hit. And obviously, maneuvering at Mach 5 or better. Additionally, when the mutually assured destruction was the nuclear strategy, the U.S. had only one near-peer enemy, the Soviet Union. And now, as you rightly point out, there are far more threats: North Korea, China, possibly Iran in its striving to be a nuclear wannabe. It's a very dangerous world. And, Trump is absolutely right in wanting to protect American citizens at home. It's a difficult position to argue with.
Guys, we can't even build a border wall. How are we going to put in our own Iron Dome? I mean, Graham, come on. I mean, if we can't put up a wall, how are we going to do this? It's probably prohibitively expensive.
Well, I think probably as for the wall, I believe that if Trump does win the election in November, I bet he will finish that wall. And even if the Democrats happen to have control of the House of Representatives in the next Congress, I think he will still get the money. I think he will still get the money to finish that wall. I don't think anyone's going to resist him this time around, especially after we've sent enough money to Ukraine, most of it which has been most of which has been wasted or gone into the bank accounts of probably Ukrainian government officials, and they're still losing that war. And for that money, we could have built a wall around the entire country and put a roof on it. But as for defense of this country, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how could anyone sane person possibly argue that we do not need missile defense and defenses against all kinds of other weapons that are evolving? My fear is that, I mean, Dave pointed out, I mean, this is a big country. I mean, the Iron Dome doesn't even protect the whole of Israel. And Israel is a speck on the map compared with the United States. And to have a missile defense system that covers the whole of the US is something that would take probably trillions of dollars and probably a lot of years. And by the time it is complete, we're probably going to have to worry much more about all kinds of other modern methods of attack, such as swarms of drones being released from ships at sea and all those kind of things. So yeah, sure, I'm all for defending the country, absolutely, and worth the expense even. But I fear that just defending against missiles is just one small part of the puzzle. We've got all kinds of things to potentially defend against within the next 15 to 20 years.
I want to know, Clark, how do China, Russia, and North Korea stack up to what America already has in place?
Well, and I think that to the extent we know, because I think that's constantly evolving, and Dave knows a lot more, even as he's discussing, they're just developing new gadgets all the time on both sides of the oceans, and they don't always announce to us what they have up their sleeves. I think that's part of this context. So I think it's really important to look at that. I think Dave mentioned at one of our previous sessions that this could provoke a new arms race. And that raises the issue that Graham and you are addressing, which is the economics. Do we have enough money with the deficit we have in this country to build everything that we want to build? And that raises an issue to me that I think bears here. I don't think North Korea is a real threat. From what I see, they have less than 100 nuclear warheads. They probably would blow up on their right there, in North Korea before they got far. But Russia and China are very different things. China is estimated to have maybe 400 nuclear warheads, but they're dramatically increasing their warheads to like 1,500 by next decade. Russia is probably well ahead of us. Dave might speak to this technologically. They got whole new gadgets. We have been resting on our nuclear laurels for a long time and depending on our conventional forces. From what I've been researching and been watching with horror, we're decades behind on maintaining our existing nuclear systems. Now, if our enemies, who seem to be, even Russia and North Korea chatting, if those three nations were to start coordinating against the great America, I'm not sure they're going to be happy that we move towards a defensive system that might help us counter their advances. They're kind of ahead of us, if I'm to understand things. And we don't even have the labor resources in this country to maintain and update our existing arsenals. I actually watched a whole documentary about this recently. I hope our enemies don't notice, because if you have incompetent presidential leadership coupled with someone who is coming in to put in an SDI type of defense that might render all of your offensive weapons ineffective, then maybe you strike now. So I think there are economic risks, and I'm inviting Dave. Dave said, who could argue with it? I'm not. That invites me to play devil's advocate. But I'm not sure economically whether we can win an arms race without destroying ourselves economically. And then, as Graham pointed out, is our real risk nuclear holocaust, or is it a new disease, or is it an EMP, or is it AI that takes over our nuclear bombs and drops them on us? I mean, this is a new world, a brave, maybe not brave new world, but anyway, that's just throwing out some ideas. But so in answer to your question, Russia has more weapons than us, but I think they're also more advanced in their technology and their ability to deliver those weapons than us. And China, who knows what they're doing? I actually think, if you look at their history, they're not as amped up in this nuclear war, but they may be getting there. And I don't think we want to give them an incentive. That'd be a big dome over China.
So do you think, Andrew, that we're really not ready to do this kind of Iron Dome? I mean, do you agree?
I might perturb Dave on this, but if the U.S. didn't engage in these wasted wars and interventionist foreign policies, then perhaps the U.S. would have been able to afford the amount of money needed to construct maybe even half of this Iron Dome. Because how much has the world spent, or has the United States spent on invading Afghanistan and invading Iraq and all that stuff? But I would say because John invoked economics, I would say that the United States already has an Iron Dome. It's called the U.S. dollar. Now, the U.S. might run it, Duncan, but the world runs on the dollar. 80% of oil transactions are done in the dollar. 60% of the world's currency reserves are denominated in the U.S. dollar. You look at the recent Treasury data, foreign holdings of U.S. debt grew to, I think, a record of $8.2 trillion. China is the second largest holder. If countries were to attack the United States, whether nuclear warhead, bombs, whatever the case, that would decimate the U.S. dollar and all these people's holdings in U.S. dollars and all their exposure to dollar-denominated assets, U.S. stocks, whatever the case. So the dollar itself is probably America's greatest strength and its greatest shield because everyone relies on the dollar. I mean, you look at what happened to Russia. Russia invades Ukraine. They get completely isolated from the financial payment system, and their economy has done well. But if China were to, let's say, lose its biggest market for exports, that would not be a good thing for these countries. So I'm sure a lot of governments would be hesitant to invade the United States just based on the economics of it and the U.S. dollar.
China, but not Russia. And if we're depending on our dollar, I think we need to do some maintenance there. And I'm sure you'd agree.
Yes, I would agree with that. However, Russia does what China says, and China is the one that has a lot of exposure to the U.S. And I'm sure they have a lot of pushback. Because I highly doubt, we talked about de-dollarization a lot on this program and a lot on LiberateNation.com, but the alternatives in this world are not very realistic. I mean, even a BRICS currency, all these countries, their totalitarian leadership, a lot of intervention, manipulation of currencies. So the U.S. still is dollar dependent. The dollar hegemony is going to remain intact. And, maybe it'll be when I'm an old man, but, the dollar will continue to be the king.
All right. So we know Trump's got a plan to up our defense systems. What about the other candidates? I mean, is RFK Jr. saying anything? It was Biden, now it's who knows. But if it's the second part of the Biden ticket, if she sticks with the Biden plan, how does that look moving forward with defense systems in any administration that we're going to have?
It's not looking really that appealing, actually. And, you're going to see just a continuation of what we have, which has been insufficient. And you're going to have money poorly spent to the point that we've spent almost $150 billion trying to prop up Ukraine. And we have no earthly clue as to what the end state looks like. That's throwing good money after bad. If Trump has a way of sitting down with Putin and Ukraine and saying, hey, look, Mr. Zelensky, Mr. Putin, these are your choices. Because on the one hand, we can get really stingy, Volodymyr, and we can get really tough with you on sanctions. I've looked at the sanctions and they're not particular. I mean, okay, they're pretty comprehensive, but they're not restrictive. Mm-hmm. Russia has actually increased its worldwide revenue as a consequence of these really restrictive sanctions, and so more can be done. And so there is a stick that Biden has failed to use. Kamala Harris will probably not be inclined to use because she doesn't understand its point. So I think that what needs to be done here in terms of overall U.S. Defense initiatives, we can increase the missile defense more than 44 missiles and be headed toward in a very deliberate and structured and responsible way. And because there's a lot of, as Graham pointed out, there's a lot more than just ballistic missiles that we have to deal with. But at the same time, I think that that it would appear as though the Biden administration and Biden light coming in will probably not do anything any differently. And as we've seen, that's not been very effective.
Well, and of course, the big thing here is the border as well. The southern border represents actually, you know, we're talking about missile defense. I know the theme of the segment was missile defense, but you look at how much danger we're in from our southern border. And if whoever succeeds Joe Biden actually manages to pull off a win in November, which would, I personally, I find that very hard to get my head around that that's even possible. But if they were to do it, our border will continue to be open. Those illegals will continue to flood in, and we will be in increasing amount of danger. I mean, forget missiles. You know, that'll be the least of our worries.
And I think that's the threat. And in answer to your question about Kamala, to the extent she tries to make national security an issue, I don't think she has much credibility. This is an administration and a party that has made social justice causes like late trimester abortion, illegal immigration, and reparations for 200 years ago their top issues on their platform. They can't very well shift them now. And as Clinton or others have observed, I think it was Carville originally, it's the economy, stupid. That's been rising to the top. The border's been rising to the top. But there's a lot going on of skirmishes around the world right now with the Russians and the US and China that looks pretty scary. And you don't see it a lot in the mainstream media. Why? Because it would destroy what the Democrats have done. They have been fiddling while Rome burns. Our enemies around the world are cackling as we are battling with a fentanyl crisis and divided against ourselves over social issues while we allow our nuclear arsenal to rust into the ground. And so I think that's why maybe we need to get the cart before the horse on, you know, I'm not against maybe an SDI project, but it seems to me we have a bigger crisis fixing what we've already allowed to lapse. Now, how is Kamala Harris going to switch out her priority of issues? And the day this country in the next few months has a national incident that shows an actual threat to our borders from another nation or national security, which we seem to be in a generation of people that have forgotten this is even a possibility. I just think she has no credibility whatsoever, and that's going to push Trump towards the office, you know, whatever people think about that.
And additionally, John, and here's the thing, John, as well, following on from what you were saying there, is Kamala Harris is even more beholden to the progressive wing of the Democratic Party than Joe Biden ever was. And so she and, you know, progressives, they don't want to talk. They don't even want to talk about national security. It's of no interest to them, national security. They want to talk about, you know, what you were saying. It's all about the social justice issues. You know, the only foreign intervention we're going to have if we have a Harris administration, the only foreign intervention is going to be sending, you know, a couple of $100 million to, you know, buy dresses for transvestites in Uganda. I mean, that's what it's going to be. You know, so Kamala Harris is not indeed going to pivot to any kind of start talking about national security because the progressives don't want her to talk about that. She's going to hammer on abortion mostly and then the other social justice issues.
I think this is where actually the Republicans do have an edge here in terms of talking with the American people. I mean, they're going to have to deal with things like, excuse me, but you've spent billions on the Sentinel system, and you didn't realize that you might have to replace the copper wiring put in the ground in 1970 with fiber optics. Oh my gosh, they've got to deal with not only improving and enhancing, but also being much more adult about the weapons that they buy. Things cannot continue to be pushed to the public at one price and purchased at 10 times the price. That is not going to work for anybody.
All right, guys, we're going to have to wrap this up, but we will talk more about the candidates, Homeland Security plans as we near the election, at least when we have a Democratic candidate for real. Join Trump and an independent Robert Kennedy Jr. maybe on the debate stage. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, panel. We are back to have a little fun with the panel of curmudgeons and comics, and we will muddle through. It's a C5 game of trivia brought to you by Liberty Nation News' own Kirsten Brooker with our main host with the most, Mr. Andrew Moran.
Hello, and welcome to another big trivia show. I am Andrew Moran, hosting C5's Just for Fun segment for the second consecutive week. I don't know why, but it must be you fine Liberty Nation News readers flooding Sarah Cowgill's inbox, demanding my presence on everyone's favorite part of the C5 program.
Darn straight, Skippy.
For the next little while, the fine folks in this panel are going to dazzle you with their intellect, wit, and their ability to endure my whiny voice for the next 10 minutes. But hey, we all need a break from this election cycle that is turning out to be a roller coaster. You want to scream, you want to throw up, but you know you enjoy it. Since we're on the subject, I'm not sure if you heard the news or not, but Kamala Harris is going to have interpreters at every campaign event, press conference, and speech. Turns out that everyone is seeing her will be wearing earplugs to avoid having to hear her laugh. And that was my homage to Bob Newhart, if anyone got that. Anyway, so let's get started with a list of questions coming from the brilliant, chaotic, hilarious, and downright questionable mind of America's frenemy, Kirsten Brooker. So let's go. Question number 1. The White House recently announced that it is awarding close to $2 billion in grants to at-risk A, schools and education centers, B, auto manufacturing plants, or C,
auto manufacturing plants.
Yes, Mr. Dave.
Woo, that was quick.
What is the title of J.D. Vance's? Please, I know you guys are gonna get this. Just let me answer.
Hillbilly Elegy.
Yeah, everybody jumps the buzzer.
No, we all.
When I'm in charge, we follow the rules. Because
I was a teenage werewolf.
So, what's the title of J.D. Vance's biography, which spent 54 weeks on the bestseller list after his release? A poem for the South, Hillbilly Elegy, or Pro Childhood?
Hillbilly Elegy.
Okay, Graham gets that.
As I
Sorry,
said,
John.
before you even finish speaking the first word.
So, here is my favorite question of the day, just because of the alliteration, baby, and this one is for you, James Fight. Which state has become increasingly important in the upcoming election with an open and crucial Senate seat? Is it Massachusetts, Missouri, or Montana?
Montana.
Question number 4. After 20-year-old Thomas Matthews Crooks fired his weapon on Donald Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, Trump stood and shouted blank while raising his fist to the crowd.
Fight.
Is it Gramanomics? Is it nice try? Or is it fight?
James Fight.
I got that one. I'm taking that one. You guys can just I got it.
Actually, I think John is correct. I think it was James Fight. I think that's what he was actually mouthing to everybody.
James Fight.
So, question number 5. Please, everybody, wait until I give the answers to provide me with one of your
All right, because there's got to be
Hey.
some comedic answers in there. So let's give him a break.
Exactly, and then we can extend this segment for as long as we can. Also, so question number 5: data from the State Department of Local Government Finance and the U.S. Agricultural Department shows that blank are included in its counting of farmland. Is it A, John Clark's red shirts, B, gardens and landscaping, or C, solar panels?
Hey,
Solar panels.
C.
solar panels.
I blanked out for a moment there. I don't know who got that answer first, but I'm just gonna say John Clark because I cannot stand. Actually, no, I'm just
Anti-solar.
I'm gonna say Graham because I can't stand John Clark's red shirt. Sorry, guys.
You can't. You're colorblind.
Oh, okay.
Green,
This
my
question
green
is
tie.
This question is not from Miss Booker. Sorry, Miss Brooker, but this is my question. Let's see if you guys can get this. I think John's gonna get this one, but let's find out. What economist famously asserted that monetary policy operates with a long and variable lag? Is it Murray Rothbard, Frederick Bastiat, or Milton Friedman?
Milton Friedman.
Oh,
Friedman.
Dave, look at that. Oh.
I would have guessed Friedman, but because
All right, question number 7. U.S. cybersecurity company CrowdStrike, a client of blank, has taken responsibility for the outage that began on July 18th and has affected banks, airports, grocery stores, among others. Is it the Canadian government, Microsoft, or IBM?
Microsoft.
B.
Look at Dave. Dave is just wiping the floor off.
Well, he's also
Absolutely.
not waiting on you like the rest
Yeah,
of us
he
are trying to be
jumps.
polite. So
Yeah,
if Dave's cheating, like
It's like,
Like a
name
cheater.
that tune. It's like
I
name
want to
that
be.
tune.
I want to be a Democrat.
yeah.
I think Dave is all invigorated because he's planning for the next regime change somewhere in the Middle East. I think that's what's really getting this morning, this afternoon. So anyway, question number 8: in what state did Lynette Squeaky Fromm attempt to assassinate
gosh.
Gerald R. Ford in 1975? Is it Washington, Virginia, or California?
California. I
Dave
watched
is
it
just
happen.
wow.
You did.
I did. I watched
were there?
it happen. No, but I believe it was in San Francisco, and she was across the street when she pointed the gun, and they got a hold of her before she actually shot.
Well, no
Wasn't
wonder
she
you
one
got
of the
that.
Manson people? Wasn't she one of
Yes,
the Manson
she
people?
was.
Yeah.
She was a Manson.
There's a whole
acolyte.
group of mentally messed up folks right there.
You have no
Oh.
idea.
Dave must have been 5 years old when that happened, right? I mean, he must have
Yeah,
been
he's,
young.
well, you know, yeah. It was in black and white.
Question number 9. What vice president said this? Hawaii has always been a very pivotal role in the Pacific. It is in the Pacific. It is a part of the United States that is an island that is right here. Was it Kamala Harris, Dan Quayle, or Joe Biden?
Got to be Kamala Harris.
Dan Quayle.
Yes.
Even though I know it's Dan Quayle, I still think it should have been Kamala Harris. So that's exactly the kind of things you would have said.
Here, here. Thank you, Chris.
All right. So
I
final.
mean, let's remember it's time to do what we've all been doing, and that time is now.
I was thinking of doing that now, actually.
So I think next C5, just for fun, Graham needs to host this. He's the one making all the jokes here today. He's got to be the one next time. Sarah, remember that. We got to mark that down.
All right.
Final question here. Final question here is for our lovely Tim Donner. What famous McDonald's character has helped the New York Mets turn its 2024 MLB season around? Is it Ronald McDonald, the Hamburglar, or Grimace?
Hamburger.
The hamburger.
Grimace.
Oh.
Yeah, Sarah got that one. Yeah, Sarah is great at baseball trivia. That's the second time now she's on
I'm
baseball
on
trivia.
fire.
Well, actually, on fire, it would be our Mr.
Right
Dave
now.
Patterson, who annihilated everyone. He annihilated like the U.S. military annihilated insert country here. Look at that. So that's it for me this week. Congratulations, Dave Patterson, and back to
Well,
you.
Dave
Lovely
cheated and
sour
got the
cowgirl.
nod, so.
Thank you, Andrew. Great job.
Thank you.
Even though I lost, I always lose.
Yes. Well, folks, we hope we ended on a high note for you after a weird, heavy show. Hopefully, you at least had fun. And thanks for playing again. We'll see you next time. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform: YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.